Council quarterly performance.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, I'll be very brief, and Rob and Ross might as well come up now. But just very quick introduction. The agenda today is pretty clear. It's a focus on first 6 months of the year, and you get a mix through the agenda today, both on how we've gone in terms of the financials, but as well, significantly, good focus on what is actually being delivered against what we've undertaken to deliver over the period, and the status of some of the key programs that you sponsored through the LTP. So that's really what today's all about. We've obviously got representation both across Auckland Council and also each of the CCOs arranged for the day. Rob's going to kick off, and I just wanted to acknowledge the team continue to work really hard to try and make sure that you've got information in front of you for these sessions that is clear and helpful, and we're continuing to work hard to make that happen, as well as ensuring that the right people turn up to have good conversations. So I think, Rob, if you kick off and just make sure councillors have got a good sense of the information in front of them today.
Thank you, Matthew. Good morning, councillors. So today is a session to give an update against the progress of the 10-year budget. The information covers the first 6 months of the financial year, so the period from 1 July through to 31 December. We've provided a run sheet for the day, which hopefully you've all got. If you don't, we can hand out some copies, and that gives a sense of who's attending and at what point. We start basically with the group financials, and then we basically follow into initiatives that are at a group level. So Barry will be presenting around the City Centre and America's Cup, which are initiatives that touch multiple, in organisations, so they've been included as part of the group item. And then we've also got an update on Maori outcomes within that section. That then kicks off into sessions that will be presented by the chair or board members, as well as the executives from the relevant CCOs, and then followed by the Auckland Council presentation later in the day. I'll click through to the next pack. So we've been working following the adoption of the 10-year budget, and knowing that we've got a significant investment program ahead of us, how we can actually improve our overall performance monitoring. So we trialled a new look format of the report that was taken through to this committee in November, and we got positive feedback. So we've implemented that for this quarter, and that's it's the attachment A of your report, or we've given you hard copies that were provided to your on Friday, and that looks like something like that. So this will be the basis for the conversation today. It includes, like I said, the group position, plus a summary on each of the CCOs and Auckland Council. The information here, we've tried to drive it to be more consistent. So the intention, particularly across the various organisations, is trying to make it easy for you to, so if you look at a page, you'll see the similar content that you're looking at Watercare to what you see in RFA, and the same goes for Auckland Council. So you're actually looking at it from a very consistent basis. Right in the front section as well, in the group section, we've tried to summarise the financials into very, hopefully, an easier manner, so you can actually get a really good sense of how the organisation's performing, and Ross will step you through that in more detail. And then, like I said, we have in that same section 3 summary pages across organisational initiatives. Then into the various organisational sections, basically what we do is we start with a nice tidy summary there over the top, and then we, again, based off the decisions made through the 10-year budget, we've picked out the key initiatives that were included as part of the LTP. So, for example, healthy waters, regulatory in the Auckland Council, and some of the safety and other initiatives in Auckland Transport. So you'll see that theme coming through, and that's, I guess, that very hard to see on the presentation, that box in the middle. The other key, I guess, point for this pack is we do want to note that this doesn't replace the very detailed reporting that goes to other committees. So we know that healthy waters and the natural environment goes to the Environment and Community Committee, and there's lots of in-depth conversation. The intention of this pack is to be something that's digestible and easy for you to actually get your heads around, the performance. And if more information is required, we can look at alternate means to provide that information to you. So with that, I'll hand over to Ross.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So as Rob said, we've worked really hard to try to improve the readability and accessibility of this quarterly performance pack. And you'll see that when you get into CCOs and the Auckland Council parent, we've tried hard to kind of get the key things onto one page where possible, or the shortest version wherever we can. In terms of the overall group picture, you'll see there's 5 pages at the start of the pack that kind of give you that overall group summary. And then to condense it even further, you'll see on page 2, we've got kind of the 1-page key highlights of how has the group performed through to the quarterly results through 31 December 2018. So on that page 2, there's 4 boxes, and I'll just step through each of those boxes and just tell you some of the key messages and key highlights that are coming through the results for that period. So as Rob's also said, the key purpose of the quarterly reporting is to report on how we're progressing against the 10-year budget. And so last year, we signed off a record capital investment program, $26 billion. So a hugely ambitious capital program. All of the budgets and funding is there and sorted, but what remains is actually delivering it. So these quarterly reports give you a good sense of how we're going against that. So turning to the capital results for that first 6 months of the 10-year budget, where the group has delivered $832 million of capital expenditure over that period. That is $73 million more, or 10% more than the same period a year earlier. So we're actually ramping up actual delivery of capital expenditure on the ground. We always struggle with achieving the full budget, and the delivery of the full 100% of the budget is always a challenge. But over that period, we managed to deliver 86% of the budget. So not a bad outcome at an overall group level. Oh, sorry, just I guess digging into some of the key areas within that. Some examples of what does 832 million represent. So looking in the transport space, significant progress has been made with the Eastern Busway, which will transform access into the eastern part of Auckland. 3 new cycle lanes were delivered, for example. That's Newlyn, Eden Terrace, and Northcote. So 3 new cycleways delivered that 6-month period. And up in Warkworth, the new water treatment plant went live. And over the 6 months, we've doubled the capacity of drinking water capacity in Warkworth, a key growth area. So just some highlights to give a flavour of what does it actually mean to deliver 830 million of capex over that 6 months. So then turning to how have we funded that? So a range of funding sources, one of which is debt. So net debt as at 31 December stood at $8.3 billion. So that's net debt after deducting cash we have on hand. So that was a 63 million increase over the period. But at the same time, the council group's asset grew by about 930 million. So it's a very small increase in debt compared to the increase in the value of the assets. So on the face of it, $8 billion is a large number, but it should be seen in the context of $52 billion worth of assets for the group. And every year we have revenues of the order of $4 billion. So it's important to put it into that context. In terms of the debt ratios, we are tracking a little bit below where we thought we were going to be at that point, with the group adjusted debt to revenue ratio of 237%. It's below the targets we had there, so we are a bit lower. But we are tracking. We know we've got a big investment program. We're going to utilise that. That gives us about a $1.2 billion headroom against our internal target safety ceiling we've set of 265%. So we could spend $1.2 billion to get up to that level, and over the course of the next couple of years, as we progress with the capital program, we'll move closer and closer to those debt limits. That was what was planned in the LTP and the 10-year budget, and that remains to be the case. So we're on track, in fact, slightly ahead of track in terms of being under the debt limits, but things will get tighter and tighter as we get closer and closer to approaching the limit. But we are keeping things as safe and prudent and stable as we can. We have got stable credit ratings from both S&P and Moody's.
Ross, I just have a question, and this, if we could go back.
Sorry, go back to CapEx.
No, yeah. So net debt to total asset is 16%. Most ratepayers would understand a formula like they have a house worth $1 million and they have a mortgage of 160,000, which is 16%, and they'd say, oh, that's okay, it's not too bad. And yet when we say that, there's the same thing. There's more scepticism. Now, we don't have realisable assets in many cases which we can dig out of the ground and go and sell them to someone. So how realistic a thing and how acceptable is it for us to be using that analogy?
I guess that's one part of the equation is how does the total debt compared to assets. I guess the other way we look at it is the growth in assets. We've got a large asset base, land under roads, land that's been there for a long time, existing infrastructure that's kind of there, it's not going to change. But what we're doing is we're building, we're increasing the assets, so we're kind of investing in the city, creating a whole lot of extra assets for quite a minimal increase in debt. I guess the other thing to look at as well is relative to income. So it's a little bit, our debt is just a little bit over twice our income. So if you look at household income versus a mortgage, it's another way to look at it.
I'm thinking of some speech notes for the mayor, when he can be saying, well, look, we've only got 116% to our asset base, and just think about it, it's like you're having your house for $1 million and you've got a mortgage of 160. So I just want a bit of a steer that's quite acceptable in local government land for us to be saying that sort of thing.
I guess there's pros and cons about looking at the assets, okay. But I think it is important that the key focus is in building the assets, increasing the asset base.
Okay.
And we're doing a lot of that.
I'll take a quick question from Councillor Bartley and then we'll keep moving on. Councillor Bartley? Yep. Okay.
Okay, so turning to operating performance. So we tend to focus on what we call net direct operating expenditure. So that's stripping out interest and depreciation to look at the things that the council can actually control in any particular quarter, and stripping out a bunch of accounting entries, so not including capital subsidies, vested assets in the revenue number. So you get a picture of what is the true underlying operating position. So how's that tracking? Over the 6 months, it's been $38 million favourable to budget. So it's some strong operating performance. We're well within budget over the 6-month period, and going to look a little bit below that in terms of revenue. So we're 17 million favourable to budget over that 6-month period, and it's driven by a couple of things, predominantly growth in consenting volumes. Obviously there's a lot of building going on, a lot of consents being processed, there's a lot of consent fee revenue that's come in. Also, water volumes have been quite high, particularly over the hot, dry summer months. People have been consuming more water, and that's translated into high revenue for the council group. On the expenditure side, we're $21 million favourable to budget. The largest part of that is staff costs coming in under budget across the group. And it's also a function of all of the good progress that's been made with savings. And you heard from Rob and the team yesterday on a bunch of the work and initiatives that have been going on in the savings space just yesterday. So just moving on, in terms of outlook, so that solid operating performance in terms of the underlying revenue expenditure numbers, we kind of see that, we expect that to continue throughout the rest of the financial year. We're seeing the revenue and expenditure trends go in the right direction within the council parent. As the numbers we're starting to see, January, February, are looking pretty good and showing that we continue to operate well within budget. On the capital side, there are risks there. As I said, we're delivering 86% of the capital program for the first 6 months of the financial year, but we know that it's a challenging environment. Just looking at Barry will happily tell me just how challenging that is out there. There's a lot of construction work going on. So getting that, being able to continue that momentum and keeping to get things built on time is a challenge in the current market environment that we face. So then just touching on some other information that's in that group part, a couple of key areas are FTEs and performance measures. So the group, FTEs for the group did increase by 393 FTEs over that 6-month period, so from 30 June to 31 December last year. Part of that is seasonal variation. In the summer months, we typically do have more lifeguards, more people in it running programs in leisure centres, people running events, temporary staff in the holiday parks. So there's always a little bit of an increase in staff numbers in the summer months. But in a more underlying sense, there has been strong growth in FTEs, more people in the regulatory and consenting area, so more people to process consents and support what we need to do in that regulatory space. And you'll hear more from the regulatory team this afternoon. And also another area where we've taken on more people is in the targeted rates, particularly the natural environment targeted rate, where we're gearing up people and resources to go and deliver all of the environmental programs that we're able to fund with the new targeted rate. And then performance measures. So taking into account feedback from the committee from last quarter, there was a request that we be a little bit more transparent there. The first attempt at the quarterly reporting, we kind of picked out a few key highlights. This quarter, we've included all of the performance measures that were in the 10-year budget that have a result for this quarter. So anything with a result is printed in the pack, not just a few selected highlights. And then for every measure that is not met, there's a clear explanation around, well, why is it not met and what are we doing about it? So we've tried to amp up the transparency around performance measures. So across the group, 71% of performance measures were met, 29% were not met, and no doubt CCOs and the other council parent will dive into some of their performance measures as we go through the course of today. A key area of focus where we know that we're not hitting our performance targets is the regulatory services area, but there are a wide range of initiatives, and you've heard about that before, and you'll get an update on how things are going in that regulatory services space this afternoon. Okay, so that's kind of an overall of the group results. I'll just ask Rob if there's anything else you want to add, Rob, or anything else that council should be aware of in the group space.
No, that nicely covers it. We'd like to, I guess, move on to the next presentation. So the next presentations will cover off the cross-organisational initiatives, and we'll hand over, and those are on page 8 to 10 of your pack, and we'll hand over to Barry, and he's got a presentation on that.
Councillors, we're going to keep cracking on because we did start late, so unless there's a real desperate question. Okay.
Just some feedback on the pack, it's great.
But
thank you.
that's exactly what I was saying up here as well.
Yeah, I'm just reinforcing that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Councillor Darby.
Look, I did raise this once before, and thank you for the presentation. Just on that slide there on FTEs, I'm reading that and I'm going, okay, how meaningful is that unless I know where an FTE has been disestablished and now it's contracted services, a consultant coming in on effectively the contractor is there 40 hours a week. And then it makes also less sense to me because I know that there are unfilled positions that have been unfilled for some time, that have been kept vacant. So is there any possibility in the future that we actually understand the broader picture of who works in this organisation and take into account the contracted services and the unfilled positions?
So through the chair, I guess it's, we can bring more information back, but I guess another avenue could be through the APR VFM committee, particularly the Auckland Council measure there sits as part of the C objectives, and it might be something that actually more information is provided through the tracking of that, or alternatively we can, on your request, bring something through more depth at the next quarter.
Okay.
There's questions about that before you move on to the cross operational initiatives. Questions on the first section or not? What are you doing?
We were just going to keep on going with Barry, is that all right? And then it's just we started late and we're just conscious of 10 minutes' time Panuku are here. Is that all right, Councillor Casey? We'll just crack on with Barry and then questions. All right?
Good morning, thank you. With me is Martin Shelton, who's the Program Director for the Full America's Cup program, part of, he's up on level 15, part of our team there. So if there's any questions might come up about that, I thought we'd do a real quick presentation. If there are 1 or 2 questions, happy to take those. So it's only going to take a few minutes, 5 minutes maybe, to go through this. So where we're at the moment, we have 6 challenges confirmed for America's Cup. The big news will be in June when Team New Zealand launch their boat. Boat's being built up in Albany, so pretty close by. The Alliance, as people have seen, if you've been down that way, the Wynyard Edge Alliance is full on track. Construction is going at pace down there now and meeting its timeframes. We'll just go through that a little bit more. The Alliance has picked up the program to build the SeaLink terminal relocation where the SeaLink ferry goes. We'll also move into the Dawdy Street drain project. We've just got some construction challenges around the methodology for that we're working through at the moment. The event planning is all up and running, and Martin is running that. Mana Whenua have been involved, and they represent on the governing body that's overseeing the full America's Cup program. And we're looking to give a more detailed full update on the whole America's Cup later at the end of this month. So just where we're at right at the moment, if you've been down there, and if you'd actually like to have a tour, let me know, and we can organise that. It is well worth seeing. Things that are underway right at the moment, under construction, you'll have seen the big barge down there on the end of Hobson Wharf, that's on the right-hand side. A lot of dredging going down underway there at the moment. Dredging outside the basin area and inside to get depths right. We have the floating infrastructure for Team New Zealand underway. That's in the red in the middle. That's under construction. That's important because they need that to launch the boat. We have design going on for the rest of the floating infrastructure. We have planning going on for the SeaLink, as I mentioned, and we have the design underway. It's shown in there in blue for Dawdy Drain, as I mentioned. They're just working through some construction challenges on that and should have that sorted in the next couple of weeks. It's we're discovering things there that we didn't know were there. Surprise, surprise. Buried roads, things like that we didn't foresee. So I've had to change methodology around. So that is a very brief overview where it's at. It's on track, running to plan, going pretty well. And the questions we might have had at one stage around whether an alliance was the right way to deliver this project, there is no doubt in my mind we would not be where we are today unless we had that collaborative model running. So that's a very brief overview. If there's 1 or 2 questions, we could take those.
Thank you very much for that. I think that's quite a positive summary. But I'm looking at the status of key programs of work, and 2 are on track and 3 are delayed. Now, I suppose the important feature there is that the infrastructure's on track, because if it wasn't, I'd be really concerned. But what is the impact of the delay, for example, in the commercial site negotiations and commercial negotiations with ETNZ, etc.? What is the impact of those delays? What material impact will that have?
In terms of the, in terms of the physical works, there's some delays there, but they're not on critical path. So at the moment, we've got float to cover those. In terms of the overall program, do you want to speak to that, Matt?
Since the start of the project, Panuku has negotiated a large number of commercial deals, I suppose, to facilitate the construction work for the Alliance. There are 1 or 2 still remaining to be concluded, but the Panuku's kind of record to date has been to deliver all of those, and there's nothing that actually currently immediately threatens the construction program.
Okay, so trying to summarise that and get a bit of clarity around it, there is nothing that we as a governing body should be worried about in terms of the program not being on track to deliver in time for the event.
I'm not sure I'd ever go and say we shouldn't be worried, because otherwise, but there is nothing there at the moment that we see that is going to stop the program delivering. We have, the reason I made my comment before, it wasn't totally facetious, we have in some areas very small float, and that means we don't have much, we don't have much wriggle room if something unforeseen should happen. At the moment, we don't see that, and it is progressing.
With regard to just exactly the same questions as me, just a bit more detailed. In terms of contamination, that's always hovering over everything you're doing down there. Has it come into play yet, and is it still way up there in your risk register?
Yep. Look, there was an issue which we'll work through, which was around discharging some excavated material, dredging material. They had an issue and discharged just outside the zone over the Cuvier, it's called, over the eastern side of Great Barrier. That's being worked through with the Environmental Protection Agency and with other agencies, not causing any delays. Had a bit of media time. You might recall at one stage there was a little bit there. We have had a very small concrete spill in the last couple of days, where on the wharf there's a hole which I understand is about 30 to 50 millimetres in diameter, and some concrete dribbled through that into the water below. That's the that's the contamination issues, both being worked through at the moment.
In your digging and excavation, you haven't uncovered anything you haven't prepared for as yet?
And not in these areas, except in the Daldy drain, the long blue one, where it hasn't been so much contamination. We've got a methodology that will deal with that. Will actually, what they call mudcrete, turn the contaminated soil into a stable material with cement. We have found through there things like buried roads, which were presumably part of the construction methodology, and that's caused some challenges around how to actually build through it. But in terms of contamination, nothing at this stage yet. Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Darby.
Just
Sorry,
quickly,
I have to use the speaker, Councillor Darby.
thank you. It's been a while since we've just described the public access through this area. We always said that the public were to have very generous public access. So can you describe on each of the three wharves how the public can navigate their way, walk around, promenade, look out, etc.?
After the project is completed?
Yes, post-project. Post the construction project, yes.
Right. On the right-hand side there, access down to Hobson Wharf will be down the western side of the Maritime Museum primarily. That's the way through. There is access down there. And there's public access all around the Prada building when that's built there. I can't tell you, we haven't seen the design for that, so I can't give you any indication of what that might look like. On Halsey Wharf there is access around past the event centre, which is now with the America's Team New Zealand's base, and the areas down on the northern side of that, so good access down there and out onto the breakwaters there. That will be controlled access. And then down to Wynyard Point, there's access maintained through there. That will be controlled during events when we get large crowds. I'll have to control numbers into some of that. So access is maintained as per the consent process through.
So it's consistent with what the consent identified as the egress
Correct. There's
journey lines, etc.
correct. There's no changes to that. Some of it will have to be managed during events just for health and safety. We don't get huge crowds in areas that they.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions of Barry? Well, good. Happy sailing.
Sorry?
Happy sailing.
Well, thank you. We have. We can move on to city centre.
Yep.
And perhaps if Jenny Larkin Jenny's from the, thank you, Martin. Jenny's from the Development Program Office and is hands-on on all of this work. I thought what we'd do here is go through what's underway right now in different phases, or either design, consenting or construction. Have a look at around the America's Cup time, what's happening then, and then look out 10 years. As you can see, this is right now, first quarter 2019. We've talked about America's Cup, won't cover that off. There is work in the Wynyard Quarter. We've got Albert Street, which is clearly under construction, Lower Queen, which is clearly under construction, Key Street, which has got services relocation underway at the moment, and that will be hoarded off while the works are done there. We've got the consenting process going through for Key Street. We have consenting, as you'll be well aware, for the Dolphins and for Queen's Wharf. The black blob on the right there is the Ports of Auckland car park. We have work underway, or the planning design for it is underway for Federal Street, which is shown there, and also work around the convention centre. Jenny's very actively involved in Karangahape Road and works around there as well. So it's already a very busy space right now. We look at move out for America's Cup, and the intention is to have the bottom of town, the Key Street, all that area free of construction during America's Cup. That's from the end of next year through till March 2021. We have an event, of course, we've got APEC later on in 2021, probably less intrusive in that part of town, but we are very mindful of that. Works that will be underway, Wallasey Street West, Wallasey Street East, and of course CRL will be well underway by that stage at that point. So winding back for 2021, we then have a lot underway looking at, when you look at the total program 10 years out, city centre, that area between the motorways and the waterfront, hugely transformed. And we're seeing those works happening right now. So just where we are, highlights the downtown program, a JV which is being delivered through Auckland Transport. They've got a price exchange coming up there. Karangahape Road physical works tenders are out. Victoria Linear Park business case and design is underway. We will give a more detailed update April, May. There are some big risks with some of this. We're finding real risks, particularly affecting the downtown program at the moment, around resource consents and stakeholder opposition, which really does cause us some challenges, as you may be aware. Ross mentioned construction cost escalation, and some of the costs that are in the budgets are dated now, and there have been a lot of changes in the construction market. That's something to be mindful of, and we're working our way through that. We are committed to having that downtown program area completed by the end of next year. There are some issues there that are very difficult for us to manage. So in terms of just reflecting on what it's going to look like, it's the America's Cup event, Key Street, we've got CRL coming, and total change of streetscapes in Karangahape Road area. So that's a very brief overview of where we're at.
Barry, stakeholder opposition, can you explain that?
We're finding that there are some parties who might try and achieve an outcome for them in one area by challenging in other areas, and that can cause challenges. We have a significant team, or AT do, involved in managing that process, but I think we know what I mean without going into the details. It is a challenge for us to work through.
Any further Councillor Casey?
I've got 3 questions. Yesterday, the question of the old civic building came up, and I thought the old civic building in Aotea Square,
Oh,
and I
yes.
wondered, in your plans, what are you imagining is there? Is it still the unleased old building sitting there empty, or do you have in your mind's eye, is there a grand plan?
This is
The old Auckland City Council building. I'm not sure that we have not.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a Panuku issue.
I'm going to ask Panuka. I just thought I'm asking
can't answer
you
anything
as
on that,
our
I'm sorry.
grand planners for the city centre, what you in your mind's eye see there. What's been proposed to you is going to be there at the time of America's Cup. That's all I'm asking.
What's there now is what we're working on it for America's Cup.
So
right.
that's what you an empty building.
Nothing between now and then that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yes.
My second question relates to something Simon Wilson wrote, and I should probably have asked this at the America's Cup, but I'll ask you. It was about the bus route that's going down Queen's Wharf. Can you just tell me a bit more about that? He seemed to think that buses were going to have priority over pedestrians.
Around Queen's Wharf, look, the bus program for Quay Street and that whole area is being reworked right now. There are some challenges with that on the eastern end, and the intentions that Auckland Transport had there for the bus depot, that is completely being reworked. So the buses movements around Quay Street and that part of the city are under complete review.
And Auckland Transport's coming later, so we'll ask them. Yep. I had one more question, and I've forgotten what it is. Oh no, the chair asked it. Thank you. Oh well, can I ask more about that? Actually, if you don't get resource consent for the dolphins, what happens?
The dolphins.
What's the contingency plan for all of them? Actually, if you don't, if you get a decision that doesn't allow you, what next? What's the plan B, C, D, E, and E?
In terms of delivering the downtown program and having that ready for 2021, the dolphin isn't particularly significant in that. That's significant from a cruise perspective, but in terms of the design of Quay Street, it's not particularly significant because it's a separate package of works that can be delivered independently. It's delivered substantially from the water rather than the land.
That's a good answer. Thank you.
Councillor Hills.
Thank you all, and yeah, it's a phenomenal amount of work that's being done kind of all at once. So it's really, really exciting, and there's lots of positives, but I still don't feel like I have a clear place to go or how I can, how the public see what is happening. There's some really positives, like down at Quay Street, I feel like every day that it's very clear where pedestrians, cyclists, everyone can go, and generally everything's been open. But even just, I scooted down to the ports for a meeting last week and happened to be on the wrong side of Quay Street at the beginning, and then actually you can't access the cycleway anywhere but the ends, or as far as I could tell, which was a problem. Up Albert Street every day, walking from the bus, there's still rubbish. I'm getting emails from Auckland Transport often telling me what they are doing, but it seems to be mostly focused on the road corridor, where my main focus is, where people walk and trip and where things can get done. There's some also responses from Auckland Transport, and I know it's not up to you guys, but around, we're having difficulties doing cleaning because of construction. Well, we're going to have 10 years of construction, so we better figure out a way to do cleaning pretty fast. So I just still don't have a clear who do I go to and how do I get things done. It's just around people, especially the people who live here and walk up all through the streets every day, they're going to deal with the construction, and many people are very supportive of it. But if it's not clean, it's not safe, there's trip hazards, you can't flatten out you might not want to upgrade a footpath every week, but how do we smooth things out? I've seen people with disabilities and vision impaired. It's very difficult. So if it's annoying for someone like me, I can't imagine how hard it is for others. So I just want to know how we can improve the experience throughout this in a more coordinated way, like upping the game a bit.
I'll ask Jenny will respond to the comms part around that and how people access it. If I talk to the waste part of it, which has been a real issue, the Waste Solutions team, we've actually pulled that back in-house off Auckland Transport and taking control of that ourselves, because it's been such a
ongoing issue that we've, in the last probably about 3 weeks, we've just grabbed it and taken ownership of that, which hopefully will lead to an improvement and also give much closer. People will know where to go to. It's not. It's to the waste team. In terms of the comms.
Yeah, in terms of the comms and stakeholder experience, I guess the council group acknowledged that it is a problem. So over the last few months, there's been a lot of work in terms of creating a cohesive comms and stakeholder engagement group. So there is now a governance group made up of the entire council group to coordinate the messaging and the experience. In the middle of this year, the plan is to launch a single city centre website, and we'll talk some more about it when we come back to you in the presentation in April, May. So there will be a single website that would talk to all of the construction in the city centre and direct people to the right places.
And
We're just running really late. We started late because we didn't have the quorum, and we've already got Panetta here, but we've still got one more. Sorry. Yeah. So is that all right? Okay. Right. Well, thank you, Barry. Thank you, Jenny, and we'll move on, and we'll have Phil and Carol up, please. Oh, sorry, Councillor Fletcher. Wait a minute. Sorry, Barry.
Sincere apologies, and it may not be appropriate to ask it in this forum, but I just wondered where we're going with the investment we made in St James and where St James might sit.
If Jenny or Barry don't know about that, we'll get Noel Reardon to come back. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll find out.
We'll make a note and get Noel Reardon to come back to Councillor Fletcher. Thank you. Right.
Did you come back to the stuff at the beginning? Remember you jumped to, I had a question about Ports of Auckland.
Okay, well, we'll do the Maori outcomes, and then Robert can answer your question on Ports of Auckland. Welcome.
Kia ora, Marina councillors. Just turning attention to Māori outcomes in this quarterly report. I'll draw your attention, we haven't got a presentation, I'll draw your attention to page 10 of your pack, where there's some detail as to work that's going on. Also a reminder that on Monday coming there is the joint governing body IMSB meeting, and it's in that forum where we dig more deeply into aspects of the work program. You might recall that at the last quarterly session we traversed 2 of 4 strategic priorities in depth, and at the one on Monday there will be 2 further deep dives into priorities within the work program. So I'm not trying to duplicate between that content and what you're looking at this morning. What I would draw your attention to, if I indeed need to, is that there is a significant underspend in the budget, which of course was significantly increased from 1 July through the last LTP process. What that reflects is our need to really put attention into developing projects that budget can be put towards. We're in a bit of catch up, and there's a lot of work going on around the organisation to develop a pipeline of significant transformational projects. We will, I am sure, get to the end of the financial year with a significant underspend of the 18-19 budget. I'd make the point that there are already plans in place for carry forward of budget. This is ring-fenced territory intended to only be used for Māori outcomes purposes, and that it's important we do that to do justice to the purpose for which the political arm committed that money. We have a process in train which involves all of the CCOs and the council departments, and they're working hard on that and bringing, I think, a good degree of discipline in terms of project plans and business cases to ensure that there's some quality in terms of the work program, not just that we throw money at every idea that we possibly could. Having established projects for the use of that money, there is very clear accountability. There is a very clear accountability regime in terms of reporting back, quantifying benefits being delivered as were promised in the business plans. Not sure how much more I need to say. I think that's the key observation at this half year, Mr. Chair.
Member Taipei, sorry, I'm going to leave my one on. It's ridiculous.
Kia ora, Mr. Chairman. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou e tēnei wā. Kia koe, Phil.
Tēnā koe.
So first thing I want to say is that it's not really questions so much this time, but just about the new reporting approach is good in terms of the narrative information and the contributions to outcomes. But there seems to be still gaps in the performance measures. And, what's not really coming through is the financial part in terms of the measurements there. So when you say it's underspent, already I'm asking myself where, what, how, and would be good to have that information. And then when you look at that page where it says on track, what does that actually mean in the context of the measurements and the budget?
I think, yeah, we're obviously learning to work with a new format and new approach, so there's some differences between what is being typically tabled in quarterly reports. I would suggest we need to take that point on board in terms of how the template works, and we'll be working with finance in that regard. I have to acknowledge that there are one or two other areas in terms of completion of audit actions and such like that you might have normally expected to see. So we're going to have to find a way of ensuring that progress is communicated as well.
So you also made reference to the meeting on Monday. Are you going to be providing that kind of financial information to there as well?
That was not the intention or the agreement in terms of the purpose of those meetings going forward, but obviously we'll have to take your direction on that. There isn't an item specifically on expenditure on that agenda that was agreed some weeks ago or some time ago with the IMSB.
Well, I'd just say that, again, without knowing what's tracking in terms of the funds, it's quite hard to really understand the progress at hand. So in all forums like that, I think that information should be provided to give it some context and relativity. Thanks.
I take that point. We'll find a way through that. I don't want to necessarily have to provide duplicate reports into multiple forums, and I think finance and performance is the appropriate vehicle for that financial reporting. So I think it's better that we focus on how this template works for that purpose.
Oh, well, I need to respond to that because I sit here with fellow members not here today as members of this committee, but we are 9 board members with 20 councillors and a mayor in the forum, in the joint meetings that we have, where that information should be provided to all of us. So I think that's appropriate when it's about the board's responsibilities, duties, and the council's responsibilities and duties, and reporting back on that. That should be at that forum.
We need to take your and the mayor's direction as the co-chairs of that forum.
You certainly got mine.
Well, you've got my endorsement of that approach too. I think on Monday, half the councillors are not here, which is, so whatever. I'm seeing Rose shaking her head a little bit, but We'll leave it with you. You've heard from David, and I'm giving my direction, but talk to the mayor. Yeah. If it makes Monday more meaningful, that can be a good thing. Right. Councillor Casey, you want a question about, sorry,
Yeah.
Ports of Auckland, don't you?
No, I'm on Māori outcomes.
Okay, right.
Huh?
Yep, okay. Yep.
Well, this would not be an unexpected question given the recent circumstances. I'm interested in which of the 9 strategic priorities for Te Tua Takitini address ending racism, especially racism against Māori. And what kind of budget are we putting into that? How are we doing it?
Tēnā koutou I ngā rangatira mai, I ngā tangata katoa. Thank you for your question, Councillor. So the 9 strategic priorities were set through the long-term plan 10-year budget process. And in terms of your question, there's no strategic priority there that is specifically focused on addressing racism, but all those 9 strategic priorities are actually underpinning the Auckland plan overall, overarching of Māori well-being and Tamaki Makaurau being the thriving heart of Māori cultural identity and our point of difference in the world.
So my next question is, do you think we need another strategic objective that actually addresses the issue of racism?
I think that might be something you might wish to give us direction on. I would make the point that it probably is relevant to this body of work, but I think it's deeply relevant to other aspects of the work we do to foster community engagement, healthy local democracy and such like. And I think we should think about a strategy that traverses a range of aspects of this organisation's role.
Can somebody note that through the chair? That's something I'd like to progress through whatever means we have to review our strategic direction.
I think Phil is noting that, and we'll follow that up. Thank you. I'm going to keep cracking on because now, thank you, Carol. Thank you, Phil. And Councillor Casey, you have a question about Ports of Auckland quickly?
Yeah, I kind of need some clarification. We've been down to the Ports of Auckland for a visit. We've had a presentation from them, but I have to say it was quite superficial. And I'm very interested to learn more about the cost of automation, whether it's full automation of the port, whether it's part automation of the port, and what the time frame is for this. So I know they said by next year things are going to look up. I got the sense it was quite kind of. What's our mechanism for getting a handle on that through our staff, who are the experts about whether the ports is well? We're also at distance from it. So it's back to how do I find out, not from ports, because we heard from them, but from you about automation of the port and the cost of it. I heard nothing from port about what it's costing, nothing.
So through the chair, I can't, I guess, get into detail today on that, but in terms of finding more information, it is something that we can look into. We obviously do get line of sight around their capital budgets and what that looks like, and we can actually look at preparing that. The alternative is actually looking to, I guess, an opportunity for them to come in and talk more freely on their plans and initiatives. And this is looking at Alistair Cameron, whether we have anything set up in that space, but it might be something we set up to have that conversation.
Can I just be clear, because I still don't understand how do I get to the ports? What's the portal I use to get that information so that I'm satisfied with what's happening there? Because at the moment I have no idea and I can't explain it to myself or anybody. So who is my link to the ports now? Because there used to be a link and now I don't know who to go to.
I'd say the individual coming up.
I just came here today to watch, not talk. Our team would be that link. So if any questions you have of ports, if you fire them through to my team, we'll see what information we can get you. We don't have port automation experts within council, so we'll have to discuss with ports to get that information.
It's just that within this report, it tells us that that is one of the factors that's decreasing or will possibly decrease our dividend. That being the case, I need to know what's been expended and what the benefits are of that expenditure. And I don't have anything except the briefing the other day. And I asked for a copy of the presentation, and it hasn't arrived yet. I'm not sure why that is. So I don't have any piece of paper. I just sat in the room for 2 hours listening, but not impressed with the details. Sorry, I'm not being critical. I need more information and the presentation to start with, so I can ask questions on it.
All right. Okay, thank you. There's no further. Thank you, team. we're going to put the resolution up, which is normally at the end of the meeting, but we're getting really nervous about a quorum. Full stop. So we're going to put up the final resolution, which will allow us to quorum lapses. We can still continue the business informally. Okay, so I'm going to move that. We have a second, Councillor Newman. Thank you. Yep. All right. All those in favour? All right. Good. Okay. Thank you very much. Right, welcome. Panuku. Welcome, Adrian, to I think the first meeting of the Finance Committee, and Roger and Carl. Another thing, I'm just going to ask all councillors and the presenters to pull the microphone, the whole unit, forward a bit on you, please, so that they're just don't seem to be as sensitive as the others. Okay. Thank you.
Shall I start?
Yes, please.
Ata Marie, kei te rangatira tēnā koutou. Can I please first start by acknowledging the terrible events that have been perpetrated on our beloved Muslim community in New Zealand, and in particular in Christchurch. I think it's a time of deep reflection for this country, and certainly I think it's weighing heavily on many of us. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to come today and to present the second quarter summary of our performance at Panuku Auckland. This is the first time I have come to the Finance and Performance Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to come and address you. I have met a number of you individually or in various settings, and I'm looking forward over the next 2 or 3 months to touch base with pretty much, I hope, all of you in either a public or a one-on-one setting. In my time, I was appointed just before Christmas, and I have spent a lot of time obviously inside Panuku, but also just gradually talking to a number of stakeholders in the community, in the business community, and of course within council. There's no question that Panuku is in full flight as the council's urban regeneration agency. We have been entrusted with very significant regeneration activities and other functions for the council, and we're very pleased to come today and talk about progress. And there are a number of highlights which Roger will cover off. I just wanted to pick up a couple of them. In my very short time at Panuku, we have actually been able to conclude three very important agreements with mana whenua with respect to particular projects, the America's Cup projects, pile mooring, and there is an agreement, although the hearing process is still underway, for the dolphin application. Now, the framework that has been put in place with mana whenua through those agreements, I think, is going to be very helpful going forward and provides a really good basis for quite a lot of discussion on how we work together, but also what we do together. And there will be expression that we will all see with those particular projects, and particularly the pile mooring and the America's Cup projects, of course, we will be seeing coming out of the ground and are already coming out of the ground. And I've also enjoyed a meeting with the chair of the Independent Māori Statutory Board. Acknowledgements to you, David. We have also been having quite increasing number of discussions with the Crown over a number of the urban regeneration projects where there are joint interests, and a very good example of this, which the Chief Executive will cover off, is Transform Manukau, which is the second most important centre for Auckland in terms of a well-functioning business, community, civic, education centre. There has been massive investment by both council and various agencies of the Crown, and there's an awful lot more to make that perform a lot better for both the region but also for the local community. We've got a number of things underway, but there is actually a very important joint project business case which is well in train and where Panuku has been delegated by the council to act for the council. We're also working very closely together on Northcote. Now, Northcote Town Centre is one of the most significant suburban opportunities because of the level of ownership between the Crown and the council, and there is really an opportunity to develop there an exemplar suburban 21st century transit transit-friendly, climate-friendly development. There's a massive amount of work already underway with respect to urban regeneration for housing, state housing, Kiwi Build, and also market housing. Basically, in terms of the kind of things that we perhaps see at Hobsonville, but there are actually a number of other locations where similar joint work is underway, and I think that bodes very well for the regeneration of these really important town centres. So with those opening comments, I'd like to pass over to Roger, who will take us through the highlights of this quarter, and we'll all be prepared, obviously, to answer any questions the councillors have.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, and thank you, Chair. What I'd like to do is just give you a brief overlay. In terms of the highlights, looking forward to Q3, and then take you through some of the financials as we progress through this part of the organisation. Focusing first on Manukau, construction is progressing well for our 340 affordable homes in Barrackers Place. This is a mixed shared ownership scheme, working closely with the Kiwi Build teams. It's a development that's been led by Housing New Zealand, Housing Foundation, and supported by Te Akatai. This is a formal joint venture between these two organisations. We've also executed a development agreement with Hayden Rollett for the construction of the MIT's Tech Park. This is a new centre of excellence for engineering and trades and will service over 1,200 students as we move forward into construction of that programme. Adjacent to that will also be a commercial office building, and there's an opportunity for government and other tenants to relocate to this fantastic location. We're also finalising a development agreement for the delivery of a hotel in central Manukau, and we'll provide further details as time progresses. In line with our agreement with Centre Group, we're working on better integration of the Westfield Shopping Centre, and for those of you who are familiar with this, this is a traditional centre built as a black box. And what we're doing is opening up that with Centre Group as part of their refurbishment programme so we get real activation across the square. And that will obviously lead to a much better place for people to enjoy. We're also progressing with the High Court process to remove the restrictive covenants that were in place from the early 1970s in terms of removing ground floor retail outside the shopping centre. That was a condition that we imposed on the agreement with Westfield. Following a market sounding process, we've also generated great opportunity in Manukau, particularly working alongside the Crown and we're finalising a more clear development strategy with the Crown in terms of how we're going to take the sites to market. And as the Chair's already alluded to, we're working with the Crown on developing a joint business case for Manukau, and that will be progressing forward shortly. Last but not least on Manukau, we're developing a close working relationship with TSI and also with the TEED on developing our people and prosperity initiatives to support achieving greater outcomes for the region. Moving on to Onehunga, the vision here is to create a flourishing, well-connected opportunity which connects the past, the culture, the ancestry and the communities together with the environment and obviously adjacent to the Manukau Harbour. We're in advanced negotiations to progress local connections for the first laneways project, which is commencing on site, and that's scheduled for completion in April this year. We're working on the precinct public realm scope of works, and that's also well in transit. And Mana Whenua have signalled a real interest in exploring a true partnership with this opportunity. This is critically important for us, and we've engaged with Mana Whenua right at the very beginning of our process. So as we develop the project plan for this location, particularly around the port end, we're working in partnership with Mana Whenua to look at not only Maori outcomes with Mana Whenua, but also those commercial opportunities and how they can leverage that for future opportunity. This is a long-term area of high cultural and historic significance and offers a variety of potential opportunities for mutual benefit. We're also investing approximately $1 million in repairs and maintenance to the existing facility. When we inherited that wharf, it's probably fair to say it was in pretty poor condition, and we're addressing some of those key issues around electrical circuits as a matter of urgency. The opportunity, I still believe, exists for us to harness a greater capacity and potential for Onehunga, working with the Crown on light rail and also the resolution of the land that's currently held to order under NZTA for the east-west corridor. So again, I still think that's a great opportunity for us to try and demonstrate leadership. Catch up this. Unlock Pukekohe is a new priority location for Panuku. It's one that we had an agreement to take forward. And the goal here is to achieve regeneration of the council's underutilised property portfolio within the Pukekohe town centre. The governing body approved our Unlock location in November 2018, and we're now well underway to create our high-level project plan and programme business case. The target is to have this adopted and endorsed by the governing body and our Panuku board by June of this year. So again, it's quite an aggressive timeline, and it's part of us wanting to put momentum into that region. This is another great opportunity for Maori engagement to achieve real outcomes, and one that we're working again with local Mana Whenua in order to drive real opportunity. We launched a social media platform early this year. This is a new interactive website aimed at gathering community feedback and for the revitalisation of Pamio. This product will be used in other regions as well, but this was a pilot project. We continue to review and improve the way we engage with our communities. The website features an aerial map of the project area with the up-and-coming upgrades of the town centre streetscape, community facilities highlighted for feedback. Users' views are then passed to our project team, where appropriately they're designed and planned into how we build the spaces for Aucklanders to love. One of the things that were key to drive out of this is to get to a wider context of the population, and this particular application has really been well endorsed by the young. Moving on to projects in the waterfront, the West Haven Palm Mooring Programme is designed to reconfigure an existing water space and provide 107 new berths, improve profitability, quality and public amenity across the marina. The design has been taken into account the rise in sea level resulting from the potential climate changes. The resource consent was granted back in December 2018, but is now subject to an appeal hearing scheduled for July. And as the Chair previously alluded to, we've actually got Mana Whenua in a very positive space across all 19 local parties. And at the moment, they are in support or neutral of the appeal. They're proceeding on an issue of another issue, but it's not relating to the actual project. The capex for the project will not be spent this financial year, and that has been driven by the protracted negotiations that we've had to go through in terms of securing our resource consent. And as a result, the project costs, which are still sitting at 17.5 million, will be kicking off in the beginning of next year, next financial year. Year to date, we spent around $300,000. Moving on to the Promenade Stage 2, this is a fantastic piece of public realm, which will effectively connect Wynyard Quarter to the North Coast Link and provide a really important piece of public realm infrastructure down on the waterfront. The project is forecasted to be deferred to New Year due to engagement again around consenting, which has taken longer than anticipated. Total project costs are in the order of 22.6 million. But I'm confident that this project will be proceeding within Q1 of the next financial year. The Marina Village is another agreement we've put in place for pre-lease commitments, and we're confident again that project will be proceeding in the early part of next year. We've got sufficient commitments now from the tenants in order for us to de-risk the project and move forward into delivery. Moving on to Wynyard Quarter, a development agreement between Panuku and Orams was signed in February 2019 for the marina haul-out and refit facility, commercial buildings, and a residential tower in the Wynyard Quarter. This is expected to create around 500 jobs, provide apprenticeships for 200 new starters, and it will be built in time for America's Cup racing starting. It's potentially a very exciting opportunity for Auckland and for the wider New Zealand to become a party to a world-class marina facility.
Roger, I'll just ask you to just speed up a little bit because some of this is in the report and I know there's questions and it's our fault we're running late.
Yep. Across the other locations, Takapuna, obviously construction is now progressing. We're on target for that project in terms of the capex of 29 million. We've been working with the council family forecasting the Panuku planned works for the Pēnui stream. It's probably important just to state at this point that we're working very, very closely with Healthy Waters, and therefore the budget that we originally allocated that we would spend will now be spent by Healthy Waters, so it's a significant savings to us. The material balance of the other projects we're just highlighting. Takapuna, 29 million. This project will be starting later than anticipated, so there won't be a commercial spend this year, and that's been around taking longer to get community engagement. The Avondale car park site is no longer required, so there's a 2 million saving there. The Northcote Greenway project has been delayed due to timing of land from Ministry of Education. That was a 3 million spend. The employment zone in Hobsonville, we're working closely with HLC, but the 2 million we allocated to spend this year will now take place next year. And in Manukau, the Ronwood car park site is now over for development. Conscious of time, I'll move straight on to financials and ask Carl to quickly take you through these in terms of the highlights.
Thank you, Roger. With the time constraint, if we move straight to the first table.
Could you just turn your mic up?
If I take you to the table that's at the front of the financial page, what I wanted to do is just quickly, because of the focus on our capex spend, take a little bit of time to just focus on how we got to our budget and what our budget actually means to Panuku. So on the table that you can see here, with the first column, the unlock and transform projects. These projects include Haumaru and waterfront specific project areas, and this is the area where we actually take council money and invest it back into public realm and commercial enterprise to return more money for investment back into the public realm. And what I'm looking at in the column here is just taking you through how we got to the final budget number for the year. Because what we have is we have a Panuku total budget this year sitting with council at $198 million. However, when we look at the numbers that went through for the public consultation for the LTP and budget round, that was only at 98 million. So you can see between the LTP budget bid consultation and the actual budget with the deferrals, our budgets have doubled. So what we actually had was very much a standing start into the year. And that in one part speaks to why some of the capital spend is behind budget. Looking at the second column, our SDF. Now, the SDF is our Strategic Development Fund. And you'll see in the year today, it's the light blue line, the October approved, council approved deferrals. So that's our budget with the deferrals in it. Sits at 70 million. Now, this strategic development is a fund that's available to be spent if and only if we have specific projects, which is generally purchases of property, which will add value to existing property that we own and needs to be repaid. So this is a fund that we can drop into to do a specific transaction to add value to the council group, but must be refunded. So this is different from a specific budget to get a public outcome. This is a fund that can be drawn when needed. The final number is the Development Fund CapEx and commercial renewals. Commercial renewals basically just updates or upgrades of property. We've got some heritage property in the portfolio with seismic issues which need regular or review of maintenance and work and investment there. That's half of that fund. The other half is the Development Fund CapEx, which is a historic budget that came originally from the ACPL amalgamation into Panuku. And that again is a fund that's available for where we can find investment opportunities that add value to existing property sites. And this is more for the support locations rather than the transform and unlock. So in total, what I'm trying to show here is that although we've got a council approved budget of 198 million, our current forecast and what we'll be putting forward in the budget refresh for this year will show that a spend of a total of 111 million will be forecast to be made. Now that 111 million, just for context, compare it to the FY 17-18 or last year's capital spend, that total was only 48 million. So you can see we've doubled in what we're delivering, but we're not quite as far advanced as we would have liked to have been. So what that says to me is I also need to talk to you quickly about what's in next year's indicative budgets, what's already there in the LTP, and that again is at 193 million. So we're going to have to double again, roughly, our capital spend. So you'll see more of Panuku growing and delivering. And I think that was an important part to take us, sorry, Roger, can we have the next slide, to take us through before we look at the performance, because councillors did ask us specifically about capital spend at the last meeting. In terms of our operating performance, within Panuku, we're ahead of budget. It's marginally ahead, just over $1 million, but it just shows a strong performance both across the properties we manage, but also our operational management. And again, Roger, if I can get us to flip to the next one in terms of speed. Just a quick snapshot again about the CapEx position. I won't go into the details of the reasons for variances, other than to sort of pick out that the waterfront key variances, as Roger's alluded to, around the Marina Palm Mooring, the Marina Village and the Promenade, they lead to roughly a $23 million slippage in the programme. And in the other transform and unlock, coincidentally, another $23 million slippage in the programme, listed there in the report on Appendix 1. So the Takapuna 7 million project, a lot of consultation required there, more than we'd considered. Avondale car park that's no longer required, so that's a spend we didn't need to make, so we haven't made it. So it's actually not just being behind, but it's actually making good business decisions. And that takes me to the final slide. And what I wanted to do there was just remind councillors that although we report our own financials, we are responsible for generating significant income for the council in the property portfolio. Year to date, we are 16.3 million surplus for council, and that is 2.1 million above the budget. So we've got some good property management story behind the scenes in the non-service council portfolio. That's all I wanted to say.
Councillor Newman.
Thank you very much. I wanted to congratulate Panuku on the work that has taken place in relation to Barrowcliff. I had a question around the joint Panuku Healthy Waters CapEx works for the Puanui stream adjacent to it. The scale of the CapEx, can you give an indication of the approximate cost of that project that Healthy Waters is leading in partnership with Panuku, and what's the delivery time?
I can come back to you with the actual number, but I do know that it was within our original LTP, and part of what we were trying to achieve was obviously the right outcome for the Puanui stream. It comes in several sections, and the section that was the first area to kick off, Healthy Waters were almost going to be duplicating what we were doing. So it made a lot of sense to join up with Healthy Waters to make sure that we're fully aligned and to make sure that we're spending the council's money correctly.
Yep, no issues at all. I think that's good. Parts of the stream have been very degraded, and I think that Barrowcliff is in partnership with the stream project. It's a good outcome, but I would be interested to know around the CapEx costs. I'll certainly be saying good things about the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Councillor Watson.
Adrian, at your start, you said that you were in your new position. You've been getting out and about, engaging with business leaders and whatnot, and that that's very commendable. Are you available to see odd members of the public or stakeholders from the public who perhaps have had dealings with Panuku? And I think of one instance where a lease has been terminated, the facility has been left empty for 6 months, and the sporting entity within it has, after 40 years, has basically gone into recess. I mean, and I know you're very busy. Did you have that capability to get a kind of feel across the organisation what's going on?
I will be making myself available for those kind of discussions, either by phone or there of course will also be occasions when there's a public forum at the Panuku board. I have been approached a couple of times by various parties, and I've had really good discussions. It's really important that I recognise and understand what the dealings with Panuku have actually been, but you can be assured that we will keep ourselves open, including myself, through the appropriate fora, whether it's in person, telephone, or coming into a board meeting. The one that you're referencing, I have already had some discussions with the person concerned.
Thank you, Adrian. That's very reassuring to hear.
Councillor Darby.
Thank you, Adrian, and the team. Look, probably just slightly outside of the scope, you're asked to do other things for us as well, and they're very important things. And around the CRL, there's a lot of regeneration opportunity, and we've asked you by resolution to be engaged in that area because it did appear like the chain was a bit dragged for a while, not your responsibility. And I see there's an expressions of interest in the Saturday paper about a particular site commonly referred to as, I think, 4 Merrill Drive, I think, from memory. And I've expressed, this is a little lead-in on this, to RFA that they needed to be talking to you on how this soft boundary could be between the sites rather than it being all linear. This is the site. And I've been thinking also about the other boundary with the Bledisloe house, which I noticed in the advertisement was not part of the expression of interest, and there's no intention to sell Bledisloe, I know that. But I was thinking as I walked down there, it's a tired building that could be integrated, and if we explore out of those that might be interested in the core site, how could they improve the Bledisloe site? Is there an atrium punched through Bledisloe opening up to the new building? And I'm just speculating. Are you limited to that site, or can you talk to RFA and can you talk to Auckland Council Properties about much wider, amazing outcomes?
Can I just reply briefly in the general, and then pass over to Roger, who has been leading this. So, yes, there are sites around the city where the city has particular objectives, and Panuku is asked to essentially act as agent for the council rather than being in a transform or unlock location. There's no question that the site the councillor is referring to is an absolutely core site in terms of city building for the central area of Auckland, being at the location of what will be the busiest transport hub in the Auckland region with the new Aotea CRL station. There's a process at a reasonably early stage, and I would be interested just to hear in a bit more detail from our Chief Executive as to how ideas like this can be incorporated.
Thank you, Councillor. The situation on Bledisloe is that we've gone out to market with an international practice to search wide and far in terms of getting the right development partner to achieve the maximum benefit for the city. Currently, there's been 140 expressions of interest in that site. We're going through a due process at the moment in terms of narrowing that down, and I completely endorse your thoughts and ideas. I think it's absolutely essential that we look at the wider context in terms of how do we really make that place buzz and feel. The opportunity there is not just around the actual car park. It's about getting the right partner on board and then having those bigger discussions about what could be the art of the possible. So whilst the RFQ is specifically around that car park, we acknowledge that to get the best outcome for the city, we will probably need to engage in the site next door and do an integrated master plan development.
Right, councillors, I have 3 more people wishing to ask questions, and I'm then going to close it off. So, Councillor Fletcher.
Kia ora, thank you. If you'll indulge me, Mr. Chairman, I want to ask a sort of general question and then a very specific one. As you would be aware, we have the Appointments Committee, we have the Finance Committee and the Planning Committee with our CCOs, and we don't often get a chance to explore some of those wider issues. Adrian, you're new to this position. One of the things in a governance sense I'm curious to know is, do you think that there is, there's a very wide breadth to the requirements from Panuku by the council? Is it too wide?
I don't think it's too wide. I think the challenge, which I perhaps trying to anticipate what you're talking about. The issue is that there are a number of fronts with respect, particularly to unlock and transform, and but they are well targeted, and I think that the response that Panuku needs to have is for the council to see clear progress, for us not to be taking 15 years or 20 years to actually do something that perhaps could be done in 5 or 6, particularly if we're looking at it. So that doesn't mean to say there won't still be things to be done at in a concentrated time, but we do need to have within Panuku, for the benefit of the council, we do need to have focused projects and mechanisms for you to be able to understand what is actually going to be achieved and the timelines over which that will be achieved. There have been a lot of moving parts put in place before I became chair, including the way that the council has funded Panuku, the clarity with respect to high-level project plans and program business cases. And I think that just from, and we do try to report to you on a place-based basis, so you can sort of see, well, okay, what's going to happen in Henderson? How is it connected up? But nevertheless, there is actually, that's quite true, there is an ambitious program currently. And I hope we've been able to demonstrate that you're going to be seeing a lot, there is a lot happening, but you will actually see a lot happening on the ground. Within 12 months, there are a whole lot of projects which have kind of reached, have already reached or are reaching that stage where people see things happening. So it's a very broad question. I would be concerned if it was doubled without some good thought between council and Panuku.
Thank you for your response to that. And Mr. Chairman, I would really welcome at some other forum where we could pursue this a little bit further, and also how the council can work with Panuku in terms of that relationship with central government, who are such a key partner to this. The very specific question I've got relates to the Civic Administration building. It continues for some of us to be very controversial, and I would be really welcoming of and looking for some comfort to know what is actually happening there, what progress can be made. It is part of the heritage of Auckland, more recent heritage, and just some explanation of your processes on that would be helpful.
Well, look, I'm very aware of where it's at, but there are some sensitivities around this which I will ask the Chief Executive to address in an appropriate way with you.
Thank you, Chair. The current situation on CAB, and it's been a long, tortuous journey. It's been a journey of 2 years. But I genuinely believe we are literally at the point of going unconditional on the development agreement. And the reason I say that, and I've been to you several times before when this question has been raised, is that we're right at the end of the process. The reason there's been significant delays, initially it was around actually securing the pre-let commitments for the CAB building. And the CAB building is to deliver 120 apartments, selection of 1, 2 and 3 bedrooms. The requirement of the funding institutions involved, and it's a tripartite agreement, was to secure 70% pre-commitments. That has been achieved. There were challenges in resource consenting, and those have now been overcome. There were challenges of the cladding environment. Those have been overcome. And the last piece of the jigsaw has actually been to get the tripartite funding agreement in place, which has become the most challenging part of this exercise. It's required a deep dive into the construction. It's required technical due diligence to be carried out on all contracting partners, including the subcontractors. And it has also required documentary evidence to be proved from the investors that they are genuine. And obviously a number of these investors were also overseas as well. So a phenomenal amount of work has been done to get to the position where we either have a go or a no-go position. And to date, and I'm assured by my development director who's managing this process, that this is going to come to conclusion at the end of this month. And I know I've given you dates before when we were confident we would achieve. And having spoken directly to the funding institutions, I'm confident that everything they've asked for to date has been achieved and delivered. And therefore, I think we're in the best position we've ever been in terms of achieving the right outcome.
Mr. Chairman, thank you through you. Thank you for the answer. At a personal level, I would really urge caution. This remains controversial, and for the very reasons that you articulated, support for Councillor Darby's position, because it's strategic and going into the future, the importance of that vicinity post CRL. I just feel that it might be an issue that Council might want to revisit at some point. Thank you.
Roger, there are a number of projects under the One Local initiative that you're having to coordinate with. there's frustration building about lack of delivery. I'm not necessarily pointing at you, by the way. Do you find that things are moving fast enough at community and social policy and at community services within the council?
That's quite a question.
You can be quite open about it.
You know, if I compare to other places that I've worked and lived, the process here does take considerably longer than I would have anticipated. When I first arrived here just over 2 years ago, and I analysed what we had and the opportunities in pipeline, I genuinely thought we'd be much further ahead than where we are today. We've built a great platform, we've built a great foundation to move forward. We're now moving forward very positively on a whole series of different fronts in terms of our projects across both transform, unlock and support. But there is still a frustration in terms of how long it takes us to get through the process.
Have you brought that up and asserted this at the Chief Executive Forum consistently?
Yes, it's probably important to also reflect, however, because I think we should always try to improve our processes, but we need to understand that what Panuku is doing is going into existing living communities with where there are there are many parties and they have often very strongly held views, and we're not going to always get it right, but actually it's really important for us to do our best to have the highest quality engagement with communities. Sometimes that really does add quite a bit of time, and it's but it's the time which we'll save at the end, even if it actually seems very, very slow at the start at times.
But I do remember you saying 5 minutes ago you want to make sure instead of delivering something in 11 or 15 years, you want to deliver it in 5 or 6. So, I mean, it all helps. So I'm going to move on to the second question, because in your risks summary in 2 areas, one under other transforms and unlocks, and in your summary, clearly there is, you've been positive in saying that the evolving Crown relationship and partnerships provides opportunities for Panuku to accelerate and expand developments. Changes can also impact on timing of projects and the proposed. Now, it's probably you've been positive, but then you're expressing it as a risk that maybe it's not necessarily so positive. So are you getting, and I'm going to be blunt here, there's no press here, but are you getting pushed around by Wellington over certain things? Because I do have an example in my ward where I know what that particular entity wanted to do. I know what the Parks Department wanted to do, which was the issue of leasing lands, etc., for sports fields, and it relates to the Avondale unlock situation where basically Panuku and the council have been told to back off.
Just reminding you being video.
Yeah.
There's a general comment, which of course you councillors may be aware that I chair Housing New Zealand, which is going to become the part of the new Urban Development Authority. If I can just make a general comment, the government I think for the first time is actually seriously interested in urban outcomes. It has got a lot of land and resources and balance sheet to be able to assist and partner with Auckland in a number of key locations. That entity is not established yet. It will be established very soon, but there is already work underway, and I've given some examples. Northcote is a good one. Yes, Avondale is another, and we're not talking about years and years of delay while an organisation forms itself up, but yes, does it actually have an issue which is immediate and may actually result in, and we've seen this actually with Manukau, which may result in 2 or 3 months delay on what we were already going to be. Yes, will we get better outcomes? We are certainly very hopeful. And there's some pretty good case examples, which I think where we might get to with Manukau that we would not have got to from an Auckland Council perspective without the partnership. So yes, it's it's just it's a bit clunky currently, but it really is a pretty short-term issue.
Yeah, because it's just, one needs to be aware of what local boards and what certain departments of this council have long wished for, and we're trying to do our own placemaking and to have potential placemaking plans altered or reversed or negated. It would be unfortunate. Councillor Casey.
Mr. Chairman, I've got 3 questions. One is following up from Chris Fletcher's question about the civic building, and it's the same question I asked if you were in the room earlier of our own officers, and that is, what can we expect to see come America's Cup time? Will this be a vibrant, lived-in building, or will it still be lying empty?
Caveat what I said earlier, because I genuinely believe we're very, very close to the execution of that DM agreement unconditionally. If that goes to plan, the construction and delivery of that is already set in process, and the scheduled completion for that is mid-2021 for the cab building refurbishment and repurpose. So that building will be completed, all things being expected and on plan, right between the America's Cup and APEC. So it's unlikely to be available as a building pre-America's Cup, but likely to be available and completed post America's Cup and pre-APEC.
No disrespect, it makes a lot of sense for it to be ready well ahead of the America's Cup for obvious reasons, both for the sale and even the rent of those apartments. So I actually don't get why it's taken this time, why we've had 2 years of an empty building, and I was listening very carefully. Do you need political help for this to happen, or is it just... I don't understand. What is the point? What's the blockage? In one sentence.
Could I just make essentially there is a very detailed development agreement. There are a number of parties involved with the due diligence before it could become unconditional. The Chief Executive has set out what they are, and we have actually been in the hands really of those processes which we don't have control of. We have identified in our quarter report that softening market conditions are a challenge, and without understanding exactly what has driven the extremely careful due diligence which has taken place with CAB, I think we are in an environment where funders are being very, very, very careful before they commit those final finances. So it is not something that the council or Panuku can basically rush. It's in the hands of other parties.
Rush 2 years.
Yeah. Well, we can.
It's a political embarrassment. That's what I think. Chris is much more tactful than me. That's what it's become. It's an empty, huge, livable-in building that's being unused in the face of homelessness, in the face of people who are desperate for houses, and it's empty.
Thank you.
We were in it, Chris.
Right.
We were in it.
We are moving on.
No, I've got 2 more questions. That was my civic, building question. Yeah, we were in it. My wee room under the stairs, and I loved that wee room. Go back there in a minute, actually. Sorry. I'm interested in talking just for a little about Haumaru housing, and you've blithely stated in your report that the Henderson development's going ahead. That was started in my time. That's been another one that's been a long time coming. But I'm interested in what else you're doing. In your statement of intent, you talk about new partnerships with Crown and business, but you don't talk about community housing providers. And I'm interested, what else are you doing apart from that? Tell me something else. What are you doing to increase our stock of housing for older people, of which we have 1,412 units at the moment? What's in the pipeline? What are you doing?
Yep. Roger.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll need to come back to you in detail in terms of the Haumaru policy. But in essence, the actual policy works around 42 villages. And the process with that, and obviously this is a separate discussion with a separate party, but in essence, that joint venture enables us to take sites that are surplus to requirement, to repurpose those sites, to build on their private homes for affordable houses as well on part of the site, and to repurpose the balance of the site for the older people community. So Henderson Valley Road was the first project that was kicked off on that process, and there are a pipeline of projects currently coming to various committees in order to demonstrate how we move forward in that space. The challenge with this was actually around the funding component, and obviously it's a joint venture between Council and the Selwyn Foundation. But I'd have an off-record discussion with you in terms of the structure of that and take you through that with pleasure.
Fine, but I'm interested in giving that information out to my colleagues as well. So maybe the next time you come, you'll have something about how you are increasing the stock of older people's housing. That's something we'd like to see.
Yep.
And we've said that in our documents.
Last question, Councillor?
No, I'll forget that.
That's it. Thank you, Henry, and thank you, Roger. Thank you, Carl, and pleasure to have you. We don't do a vote of thanks. We do that right at the end for all of you. So we're going to have a 5-minute break, councillors. I'm sorry, Mark and team, but let's leave that.